When I was a kid, both my parents had sailboats, but unfortunately they couldn't keep them. Ever since then, I've had the dream of owning my own boat someday. Follow along with me as I restore a 1972 Harris off America catboat. Thanks for watching this video. I don't have any supporters or sponsors. I don't even have a Patreon page. It's just me trying to navigate the challenges of restoring a 53-year-old sailboat. In this episode, I'm going to go over how I restored the hatch on the boat, including hardware removal, varnishing the wood strip, and applying Kirby's top coat with some soft sand for anti-slip. I really hope you enjoy the video, and if you do, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and click that little bell icon so you'll know when new episodes drop. So the first step I had to do is to remove all the hardware from the hatch, starting with the latch that locks the hatch shut with the cabin doors and the brass pieces that hold the hatch onto the rails that it slides on, which you can see at the bottom of your screen there. The previous owner had put a couple of bolts through the locking latch and through the top of the hatch. So after removing those, I'm going to have to fill those holes and then fair them out so they're nice and smooth, and then alter the way the latch is installed when I go to put the hardware back on. So once I had the hardware removed, it was obvious that the hatch had seen some better days. While it was structurally sound, there were some spots that had cracked, holes that needed to be repaired, rub marks, and other areas that I wanted to have sealed just in case. I don't want to have any of that bare wood exposed to the weather. On the top side of the hatch, you can see the holes where the bolts came through. And so to begin the operations, I had drilled out the hardware attachment holes larger than they were originally so that I could fill them all with epoxy. This will create a barrier between the hardware and the actual wood that's used in the hatch. Sorry for the speed up of the frame here. It's a little bit jittery because I'm trying a new head mount on the camera there. So here I'm just using some Thixo and filling these holes that the hardware all goes into, as well as some of the cracks, and those will all be sanded nice and smooth. And then when I put the hardware back in, I will sand those nice and smooth. These holes, of course, go all the way through the hatch, so I wanted to get them really nice and filled. And when I'm filling the holes, I'm overfilling them a bit to make sure that the epoxy seals the hole up nice and good. These are the brass pieces that hold the hatch onto the rails that it slides on. That was the before, and this is the after I restored them. And you can learn more about the process I used to restore the brass in a previous episode. So after about 24 hours or so, I came back to start sanding everything down, at least the epoxy part, and get ready for sanding down the hatch and prepping for the primer and top coat. So once the bottom was done, I flipped the hatch over to sand the top. The fairing compound dried nice and hard from where the two bolts came through the top of the hatch. And then I'm going to sand this, sand everything down. The top of it has about 50 years of all grip that needs to come off as well. Now that all the sanding was done, I had to wipe everything down with some Total Boat surface prep, or you can use denatured alcohol, clean all the dust and any little remnants that might be left. So I am a beginner. I never professed to be an expert at this. So I'm always curious as to whether it's better to paint a piece first and then varnish like accent wood like this handle here on the hatch, or if it's better to varnish first and then paint after. This time, obviously, I'm going with the varnish first approach, and I'm applying about 10 coats of the Halcyon varnish to this handle that's attached to the hatch. This is the day I've been waiting for a long time. I am stirring up some topside primer, and I'm going to start working on the boat hatch. And this stuff is very smelly, so I am not doing it in my basement. I am doing it in my garage. It's the only other sheltered place that I have that I can set this up. So as you can see, there's a lot of solids in here, and this is even better than it was a minute ago. So you really got to stir this stuff up. I do not have a paint shaker. So I'm also using a stick as I've seen a couple of people recommend to really mash up some of the solids that are in the bottom and get those stirred up, as opposed to one of the skinny paint stir sticks. Plus, I don't have any more of those anyway, so this will work fine. So the topside primer was going on really well. I didn't thin it at all, and it's a pretty thick product. It's got a lot of solids in it. It covered very well and was very easy to brush on. After the whole hatch was primed, I flipped it over and I used Kirby's sand colored matte finish topside paint, deck paint, which I decided to use for the deck color on the boat. And the matte paint will actually do well I think, and not reflecting the sunlight while we're out on the water, where the gloss paint is just going to be basically a mirrored surface and might be kind of hard to look at. So I did one base coat, and then I used the yellow painter's tape to mask off the area of the border around the top of the hatch. And I'm just preparing to apply the soft sand non-skid. So here I'm sprinkling the soft sand non-skid over the boat hatch. I want to make sure I put a liberal amount of the stuff on it so that there's no thin spots at all. You're going to be able to vacuum some of it off afterwards anyway. I'm not quite sure how much I'll be able to get because I haven't ever used this before. And again, it's good to start on a smaller surface instead of the actual boat if you're trying something new. After letting the soft sand dry for a day or so, I came back, I cleaned out a vacuum cleaner so it washed out the collection container and everything so it was nice and clean, and then very lightly kind of brushed across the surface with a brush tool so that I could pick up any of the soft sand pellets that weren't stuck into that base paint coat. All right, so in that first application, you can see I've used almost half the container. However, I cleaned out my vacuum cleaner, vacuumed the surface lately, and you can see I've reclaimed quite a bit. So I took the reclaimed stuff out of the vacuum cleaner, which I cleaned, washed out so I wouldn't get debris, but I still got a few things in there. So I ran them through a fine mesh strainer to filter out any big pieces, and I'll use the reclaimed stuff to fill in some of the thin spots. You can kind of see there's some streaking and some spots, and there's a few parts along the edges where I didn't get good adhesion. So I'm gonna re-roll the surface, and as I go, sprinkle the reclaimed bits to fill in some of these blank spots. And then I'm gonna give that a couple of hours to set and dry, and then I'm gonna try to remove the yellow tape and overcoat the entire hatch. And hopefully I'll get a nice smooth border. We'll see. I want to explain my process a little bit. This is the hatch, the finished product here. I've done several coats. This is not the Total Boat Wet Edge topside paint. This is Kirby's deck and hull paint, or whatever it is. Anyway, in the sand color. I had taped off the edges with yellow tape, not green or blue tape, but yellow tape, which gives me a nice clean edge. I had first done an entire first coat and then taped off the edges, and then did a second coat within the taped off area and sprinkled the soft sand all over it. It's nice and dry. And then top coated that. I did end up having to do a couple of touch-ups, so it's a little bit uneven in some places, but this is a pretty big area to do. So it's a little bit uneven, but it came out pretty good, I think. Then I overcoated that 2 times with more of the Kirby's paint. The soft sand will take a lot of paint for that top coat. Then once that was dry, I took the paint off and did a coat over the entire thing, and then earlier today I came along and did another coat just on the edges, and I think it looks great. And I'm gonna try to take off the tape around the wood, so hopefully, which I varnished over the winter. of primer and 2 coats of the oyster white gloss on the bottom, and it looks really good. Gotta clean off a little bit of tape there, but there was a little bit of damage here. There's a latch that goes on underneath here that comes down to lock the cabin doors, and they had put a bolt up through the wood here a little bit, so I patched up those holes and tried to clean that up as best I could without having to replace the whole piece here. And there it is. I'm going to let this dry or harden a little bit more before I go and stow it before I'm ready to put it back on the boat.
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. See you soon. Hope you like watching the Laura
And Catherine.
in progress.